Have you lost the connection with your higher self? Are you noticing the dis-ease of the outside world? It's time to reconnect with nature and each other and raise our consciousness, vibration, and frequency. Together we can create a world of peace and abundance. It's Spiritual Revolution Radio with your host, Dr. Will Miller.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Spiritual Revolution Radio. I'm Dr. Will Miller with the Life by Design Healthy Living Center, and today I have Dr. Rita Louise as my guest. And Dr. Rita is a best-selling author, the former host of Just Energy Radio, and the founder of the Institute of Applied Energetics. She's also a naturopathic physician and a 20-year veteran in the human potential field. She has a unique gift as a medical intuitive. She's a clairvoyant and illuminates and enlivens her work. Dr. Rita, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Dr. Will. Nice being here with you and your listeners.
Well, I'm excited about the show today for a couple of reasons. One, because you and I do have a lot in common. In fact, my tagline on my website is creating the foundation for body, mind, soul, which is very close to your tagline as well. So we should be able to talk on in the same vibration today, I hope. And but really what I want to probably start with today, if you don't mind, is just kind of your journey. What brought you to where you're at today? I know is reading about you started very young. So.
Well, it was interesting. I'm trying to get myself centered on this camera. We had to read a book when we were a kid to get our allowance. So it wasn't about chores. It was about reading a book every 2 weeks. And I was not interested in reading Nancy Drew or, fiction. I wasn't really interested in reading fiction. So by the time I was in 7th grade, I had worked my way through the entire archaeology and anthropology department at the library. And then I found the psychic section, which was right next to witchcraft, which was bad. I went to Catholic school, so that was bad. And became fascinated with the whole concept of ESP and have pursued that since that point in time. And, went to, and it's interesting, I strive to become psychic because I didn't think that I was, and I was waiting for this magical moment to happen, which didn't. And finally found the Berkeley Psychic Institute because I figured they could teach me to finally be psychic, only to find out after being in the program for a few weeks that I had actually been very psychic my whole life, and no one ever connected the dots together so that when you have these experiences, it really is a psychic moment. Mm-hmm. And that's what the experience is about, So that's my story.
So, you went to the Berkeley Institute, and before that, you didn't think you were psychic. And I think a lot of intuitives and empaths and psychics they don't know that they're empath. I'm an empath, and I didn't know I was an empath. And I have things come to me quite often, but especially growing up, I would just write it off as coincidence or
exactly
whatever it happened to be. So what did they teach you there that kind of you went, oh wow, I've been this way for a long time?
It wasn't what they taught me. So when I first started, the beginning part of the program, they had what was called a healing clinic. And the way that they organized their readings was that you would read in groups. And so in that section, since it was all new students, basically they would have a line of chairs, and then across from this row of chairs would be the client. And so whoever was like the most senior person would sit in the center chair, and they would kind of facilitate the reading. Well, this one night, students that had already finished this portion, because it kind of had an open door policy, came. And so there was like our 5 or 6 new students plus 5 other people that showed up. And so the smarter, more advanced students sat like right in the center, and since I was so new, I was sitting at the far left side of this row. And so this woman came in, and she owned a beauty parlor, and her beauticians were leaving. And what was interesting was that the more advanced people were saying, oh, well, you have this past life thing, karma about this, you have this present life contracts, and that's keeping people from coming into the store. And so I have a very practical and business kind of mind, and I'm like, okay, well, how is that helping her really at all? But as they were talking, I kept seeing this woman with long red hair kind of walk up to a workstation and slam her purse down. And so they were done, and the woman that was facilitating asked, well, is there anybody else that has anything they want to say? And so I raised my hand, which apparently you're not supposed to do, but I raised my hand, and they were like, well, Rita, what do you want to say? And I started talking, and they said, well, when you do readings, you do them with your eyes closed. And if you've ever done a reading or just try to talk with your eyes closed, it really is a learned skill, kind of like walking and chewing gum. So I closed my eyes and I just stated, I said, did you have a woman with long red hair working for you? And she said, yes. And I said, well, did she come in to the shop and was she really angry? Did she leave and was she really angry? And she said, yes. And I said, well, her anger energy is keeping people from coming into the store. So I just went, well, that's kind of interesting. That's a really cool coincidence because I've done that before. That wasn't a new thing for me. And then I opened my eyes, and the entire row of psychics were bent over in their chairs staring at me. And so it validated that was the experience, which, you can go in hindsight and look at all of the other weird things that happened to you and go, oh, that must have been a psychic experience too, because it was way more intense than this.
I love that because I tell people all the time, I say the answers are all around us. We just haven't been taught to look for them, right? Or see them. And when we do see them, we just brush them aside, right? So that's such a neat experience.
I belong to the National Speakers Association, and they had a course for people that were like participating members, but they weren't official members. And this was to help you build your skills and whatever. And so everybody had to do a 15-minute presentation. And so they needed people to do the first week. Well, I already had been speaking. I had a few presentations under my belt. And I said, sure, I'll take the first week. And so I did a 15-minute presentation about psychic abilities. And so I walk up to the front of you'll appreciate this. So I walk up to the front of the room and I'm like, hey, is everybody ready to become psychic today? And this giant wall came down. And now I am talking to this brick wall, which energetically was challenging at best. And so I do my presentation. I talk about, feeling the vibes in a room, or if you're thinking about somebody and then they call you, just the thing, the psychic stuff. And the woman who was the, I don't want to say grader, but she was giving the feedback, really wouldn't talk about anything I said. And on my little handout evaluation, she said, I don't understand anything you're talking about. I'm like, okay. A few weeks pass by and I'm at some event and she's there and she walks up to me and she goes, oh, well, I was thinking about my girlfriend, Mary Ann. And then around the corner in the supermarket was Mary Ann. And I just looked at her and a bit sarcastically said, well, then I guess you get it.
Sometimes it takes us a little longer to get it. Some people just take a little longer.
But I think everybody has psychic experiences and they just don't connect it. They don't connect the dots until you actually point it out and go, oh, well, that was a psychic experience.
Right. And I agree with you. And we're raised really not to look at those things or believe those things or whatever it happens to be. So, you had that history by reading the library of getting to that point and really learning early. I want people to know some other things about you because you really have a fascinating career. You've dealt in feature videos and producing videos, a lot of them. If people go to your website, too many to name here, but Ancient Aliens is in there, and the Ancients and Holy Deception. There's some really good ones in there. What tell us a little bit about that and what you've done there.
And so, I have come to become a consummate researcher, and so I just will study anything that floats my boat. And so, I did a number of years studying metaphysical stuff, and so I kind of got to a point where it was like, not really anything particularly new. But then around 2012, with the Mayan calendar thing, and it's a whole long story, which I won't go into, I started looking at mythology because they were talking about the Mayan calendar and the mythology, and they have the same thing in the Mahabharata, and I'm like, oh, well, that's kind of interesting. And so I started digging and started seeing these parallels in mythology. And so my first love in life was archaeology. So I got to go back, not to my second love in life, which was at 12, but to my first love in life, which, however old you are in 5th grade. And just started doing some deep diving into that, and then in the middle of all of that, I did a lot of ghost hunting and working with clients with entity attachments. And so I found that, there's stuff that is really good for the written word, and then there's stuff that is more suited for video production, or these days people are more likely to watch a YouTube video than necessarily read an article. And so I kind of shifted my focus to making some of that material more accessible to people.
And do you have a YouTube channel? We'll put a shout out for it if you do right now.
I mean, the YouTube channel is Just Energy Radio on YouTube, but I haven't really put anything there. I haven't really done anything on there since I stopped doing my radio show.
I see. Well, in addition to to these videos and being involved,
but there are like 10 years of archives.
I was going to say, looking at your page, there looks like there's a lot there that people can see. And you're also a best.
Ton. Sorry.
No, that's fine. There is a ton. Yeah, you're a best-selling author as well. You've written several books, and your latest is called The Dysfunctional Dance of the Empath and the Narcissist. So kind of expand on that. That's an awesome title, by the way.
Thank you. Well, I wasn't really planning on writing that book. I had just, about 6 months before that, released a book called Stepping Out of Eden, which talks about the development of humanity, or I'll say the evolution of humanity, but it didn't look at it from a physiological perspective. It looked at it from a more cultural perspective. And how did humans become human? How did mankind become the social, cultural creatures we are? And brought in a lot of mythology into that to support this progression. Anyway, so I was in the middle of promoting that, but then I ended up breaking up with this guy and started looking at the concept of narcissism and narcissism in relationships. And, it's one of them Band-Aid moments.
Right.
Came to discover that most of my adult relationships were with narcissists. I had a lot of friends or former friends that were narcissistic, and my parents were narcissistic. And it was like, okay, well, maybe I need to do some healing around this topic. But then Spirit always jumps in and said, well, while you're doing this research, you should write a book. And so while the book is not biographical in nature, it really was kind of my journey as I would go and explore a different concept. I would take notes and added it to this book. And so it really is about healing childhood trauma, because that's usually where the dysfunction originates. Either you become an empath / codependent on one end, or you become a narcissist on the other end, and they really are pretty much diametrically opposed, which is why they end up looping back and connecting with each other.
And so, and I was reading a little bit about the book today before the show, and you talk about in the book how people who have had these childhood traumas typically become narcissists. I had a question as I was kind of reading through it that came to my mind, and that is, do you believe then that most people are either narcissist or empath, or is there somewhere in between, if you will?
So I believe that narcissists are definitely born out of dysfunction. I think that, and I call them kind of broken empaths, are born out of dysfunction. I believe that people come into this world more sensitive. And one of the things that I came to the conclusion on is that if you're a sensitive and you're growing up in a dysfunctional household, this wasn't my life story, but I think it portrays the point the best. And daddy comes home and daddy's an alcoholic. And now you're in your room playing, but you hear the door open and it's time that daddy should be coming home. And now your antenna go up and you're checking the energy to make sure if you should just stay in your room or if it's safe to go out and play. And so I feel like through that evolution, they really develop that skill at feeling into energy and feeling into people and feeling into the environment, which makes them be much better empaths.
You know what? I like that. That's good. I'm going to use it.
Okay.
I think that's so true, and I, as you were talking about that, I was thinking of my own childhood, and my daughter is here in the studio with me today. She's over there nodding too. She's like this over there nodding away too. So it's hitting home what you're talking about. Tell people, and we can talk more about the book, because I think the book ties into a lot of what you do for people in looking online at soulhealer.com, which is your website. The services that you offer, tell people how they work and what you do, if you don't mind, on that page.
Sure. And so there is the intuitive part, so I work as a medical intuitive, which does intuitive assessments of people's health, body, mind, and spirit. So I might be talking to you about your physical body. I might talk to you about your relationships. When you do intuitive work, it's kind of like, throw out a question and I'll come up with an answer, because spirit will always provide insights. And so that's one of the main services that I offer, is giving people guidance so that they can understand what's going on, or their next step, or a direction that they can go. But then I also offer, more healing service, whether it's energy work directly with the client, doing spiritual counseling with a client. One of the new things that I'm starting to incorporate is actually doing like mindfulness work with clients, because what I'm finding out is that by quieting the mind, if you come from a dysfunctional place, many times you're either trapped in a cycle of rumination when you get triggered, or in a cycle of worry when you get triggered. Mm-hmm. And so you can do energy work to help the person get back into the present moment and be able to release. But if you can teach the person mindfulness and some skills and techniques of being mindful, whether it's meditating and quieting the mind, grounding the body, helping them work through what's going on, they can actually assist in their own healing.
And I agree with that. I use that in my own practice a lot, teaching meditation and mindfulness work and, mm-hmm. and dealing with that. So you're all about healing the body, mind, and soul. So kind of give us how that all ties in for you. I mean, I have my idea, but I want to hear yours.
I'm just trying to think, so, and I'll use like a traditional health client, so someone might come to me and they're having some kind of a gallbladder issue, or a digestive issue. And so when I work with them, I'll look at, what's going on with their gallbladder. Is the organ healthy, which in most people it usually is. Do they have gallstones? Is there issues with bile moving through the gallbladder? Is it really a liver issue going on? Do they need to do cleansing? And so I'll make recommendations about doing like a gallbladder cleanse or whatever. Mm-hmm. So that's the functional physical part. But if there's disease in the body, there's usually something going on, some psychospiritual, emotional piece tied to it, and so I'll kind of connect. I like my very scientific word. I will palpate their organ and bring up whatever the limiting belief is. And so usually it will come out with a statement, or come out with a recurring behavior in their life. And so there's the body, we can do some cleansing and some supplementation and dietary thing, blah, blah, blah. But then there's the soul part, which is, this is where I'm coming from, and this is what's creating it in the first place. So people that work with me come in anywhere within that spectrum of there's stuff going on. I got stuff going on and I need your help.
Yeah, and I think you make kind of an important connection there. We are a body, mind, and soul, and the body really responds to the soul and the mind, which is what binds it. So, you're obviously have the background in being a naturopath to give people the right nutrition and the right things for their body, but you really understand that there's an underlying issue that's causing the dis-ease within the body, and that's I think an important thing in healing body, mind, soul. You really need all three things going at the same time.
Well, the way that a disease will present is that it actually starts, further up the chain. It'll start in the mental body, or it'll start in the emotional body. And then over time, it will actually break through into the physical. Right. And so you can provide the supplementation to address the physical, but it might only back it up so that you're not physically presenting, but it's just sitting in the background. It's not necessarily healing it, right? Not healing the root cause.
Yeah, I agree. I think what you do by doing that, and what a lot in the medical field do, is they're masking the problem or putting a Band-Aid on the problem, but it's really not healing the issue. So. I think that's important for people to understand and distinguish. People can find you at soulhealer.com. I know at soulhealer.com you also, besides your private practice and helping people, you also train students in medical intuition, intuitive counseling, and energy medicine as well. Is that correct?
That's correct. So if someone's interested in learning how to be psychic or do energy work, it is, and I'll say it's a professional level training program. So if you're just looking for a weekend thing, it's not the right place for you. But if you're looking to do this as, and I'll say a career, because you just have passion for it, you leave and you feel competent working on clients. As my dad would say, you'd be ready to hang a shingle.
I love that, and I think that's great because you are a professor in alternative health studies at Westbrook University, so you definitely know what you're talking about. You have the credentials, and people that really want to learn and understand and put this into practice for themselves and for family members and others. It's a great place to go. I spent a couple hours on your website just going through everything I could find today. You have some great things that you give away for free, and people can get to help them. So people out there should look for you at soulhealer.com. Anywhere else they can find you or that they need to know about?
I also have a sister site, which is medical-intuitives with an S.com. Medical-intuitives.com. And so while the Soul Healer site covers everything from aliens to health, the medicalintuitive.com intuitive.com really focuses on health, so I have bad breath. What can I do about that? And it gets more into talking about subtle energies and the chakras and energy movement. And so it has a different focus versus this kind of giant panacea of material.
Well, we are just about out of time. Got a few seconds left here. Everyone, thank you for coming today, Dr. Rita. Soulhealer.com. You can find me at spiritualrevolutionradio.com. Thank you, everyone, and love and peace.
This has been Spiritual Revolution Radio with Dr. Will Miller. For more information or to be a guest, please visit lifebydesign.institute. Join us next week for another edition of Spiritual Revolution Radio with your host, Dr. Will Miller. This has been a production from a podcast studio.